I realized my name wasn't even listed in my parents' will. Everything went to my sister. So I quietly stopped covering their expenses. A month later, my mom messaged, "Power's about to get cut." No greeting, no explanation. I simply responded with one word and blocked them. I, 32M, discovered something that shattered 20 years of loyalty and sacrifice. My parents had written me out of their will entirely, leaving everything to my sister while I'd been quietly funding their comfortable retirement for years. The discovery happened by accident. Dad had asked me to grab some documents from his home office while he recovered from knee surgery. I was looking for insurance papers when I found their will, updated just 6 months ago. My hands shook as I read through page after page, searching for my name. It wasn't there. Not once. My sister would inherit the house I'd helped them buy, the car I'd made payments on, and the savings account I'd been contributing to for the past 8 years. Every dollar I'd sent them, every sacrifice I'd made to ensure they lived comfortably in their golden years, it all meant nothing. The irony burned. My sister lived 3 states away and called them maybe twice a year. She'd missed Dad's birthday for the 3rd consecutive year and hadn't visited since before the pandemic. Yet somehow, she was the sole beneficiary of everything they owned. I sat in Dad's office chair, staring at the legal document that reduced 20 years of devotion to nothing. Since college, I'd been the son who showed up. When Dad lost his job at 58, I covered their mortgage payments for 6 months. When Mom needed surgery, I paid the medical bills insurance wouldn't cover. When they wanted to retire early, I supplemented their income so they could maintain their lifestyle. Every month for 8 years, I transferred money to their account. It started as help during Dad's unemployment and became a permanent arrangement. They never asked directly. They just mentioned struggles paying bills or wanting to take a vacation they couldn't afford. I always stepped in. Meanwhile, my sister pursued her art career in California, sending occasional photos from gallery openings and expensive restaurants. She'd built a life funded by her husband's tech salary while I postponed buying my own home to support our parents. I'd been living in the same cramped apartment for years, telling myself it was temporary until I could afford something better. The will spelled out their reasoning in cold legal language. My sister was named as the responsible party for their legacy, the one who would preserve family traditions and values. I was mentioned only in a clause specifically excluding me from inheritance, as if they'd gone out of their way to ensure I received nothing. That evening, I called my bank and canceled the automatic transfer I'd set up years ago. No fanfare, no announcement. I simply stopped the monthly payments that had been flowing from my account to theirs like clockwork. Over the next few weeks, I watched them carefully. They didn't mention the missing money. Dad complained about rising grocery prices and Mom talked about wanting new curtains for the living room, but neither acknowledged that their financial cushion had disappeared. They seemed to assume the money would always be there, that I would always be there. I started declining their invitations to family dinners, claiming work obligations. When they asked me to handle small tasks around their house, I suggested they hire help instead. The shift was subtle but deliberate. If I meant so little to them that they'd written me out of their future entirely, then perhaps I meant little enough to step back from their present. 3 weeks after I stopped the payments, Dad mentioned during a phone call that their credit card bill was higher than expected. He wondered aloud if I might help with it, using the same casual tone he'd always employed when requesting money. I told him I was dealing with some unexpected expenses of my own and couldn't help this time. The conversation grew awkward. Dad had clearly expected me to offer assistance immediately, as I always had. When I didn't, he seemed unsure how to proceed. He mentioned that Mom was worried about their budget, that retirement was more expensive than they'd anticipated. I made sympathetic noises but offered no solutions. A month after discovering the will, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a stark message informing me that their power was about to be cut off. The tone was expectant, demanding. She'd sent it as if I were an employee who'd failed to complete an assigned task. I stared at the message for a long time. This was the woman who'd raised me, who'd packed my school lunches and cheered at my graduation. This was also the woman who'd decided my 2 decades of financial support earned me nothing in return, who'd legally ensured I would inherit none of what I'd helped them build. The months of quiet resentment crystallized into something harder. I typed one word in response: unfortunate. Then I blocked both their numbers. Update 1. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. My sister called me from California, her voice tight with irritation. She'd received frantic calls from our parents, she said, and wanted to know what was going on. They'd told her I'd been acting strange lately, that I'd refused to help with their bills and had blocked their numbers. I let her talk for several minutes before asking if she knew about their financial situation. She seemed confused by the question. Our parents had always been responsible with money, she said. They'd raised us to be independent and self-sufficient. Surely they had savings for emergencies. I asked if she'd be willing to help them if they were struggling. The pause that followed told me everything. She lived on a budget too, she finally said. Her husband's startup was going through a rough patch, and they were trying to save for a house. She couldn't take on additional expenses right now. I told her that I understood completely. Financial independence was important, after all. I suggested she encourage our parents to review their budget and perhaps consider downsizing if money was tight. There were resources available for seniors facing financial difficulties. She asked why I was being so cold, so different from the brother she knew. I explained that people change, that priorities shift over time. I was focusing on my own future now, planning for my own retirement and security. Surely she could understand that. The conversation ended awkwardly. She said she'd try to help figure out what was wrong with our parents' finances, but I could tell she had no intention of opening her own wallet. That evening, I received several voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. My parents had clearly borrowed phones from friends to try reaching me. I deleted the messages without listening to them. Update 2. 2 weeks later, I ran into Dad at the grocery store. He looked older somehow, more fragile than I remembered. When he saw me, his face brightened with relief. He approached as if nothing had happened, asking about work and commenting on the weather. Then he brought up their situation. The utility company had given them an extension, he said, but they needed to catch up on several bills. He wondered if we could talk privately about helping them through this rough patch. His tone was careful, almost pleading. I asked him what had changed recently in their finances. He seemed confused by the question, claiming nothing had changed. They were living the same way they always had, spending the same amount on the same things. It was just that costs kept rising while their fixed income stayed the same. I mentioned that I'd seen their will while looking for insurance documents. His face went pale. I told him I was curious about their estate planning decisions, particularly their choice to leave everything to my sister. The conversation that followed was painful and revealing. He tried to explain that they'd always planned to leave the house to my sister because she had children to think about. I reminded him that she lived across the country and had never expressed interest in moving back. He said they assumed she'd sell it and use the money for her family's needs. When I asked about my role in their decision, he grew defensive. They'd thought I was more financially stable, better able to take care of myself. My sister needed the security more than I did. Besides, I'd always been the responsible one, the one who didn't need help. The irony was staggering. Because I'd been responsible enough to help them for years, they'd decided I didn't deserve to inherit what I'd helped them keep. Because my sister had never offered assistance, she needed their support more. I told Dad that I respected their right to distribute their assets as they saw fit. Their will had helped me understand my place in their priorities, and I was adjusting my own priorities accordingly. Just as they were focusing on their future and my sister's needs, I was focusing on my own financial security. He asked what that meant exactly. I explained that I was no longer in a position to provide financial assistance to anyone. I was saving for my own home, my own retirement, my own future emergencies. I suggested they contact my sister if they needed family support, since she was clearly their chosen heir. Dad's expression crumbled as he realized what had happened. He asked if I was punishing them for their estate planning decisions. I told him I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply prioritizing my own financial well-being the same way they'd prioritized theirs. Update 3. The legal papers arrived 3 weeks later. My parents had revised their will, dividing their estate equally between my sister and me. A note from their attorney explained that they'd requested the change urgently and wanted me to know about the modification immediately. I threw the papers away without reading the details. That same day, my sister called again. This time, she was angry. She'd been forced to send money to cover our parents' utilities and was furious about the situation. She wanted to know why I'd abandoned them, why I was letting them struggle when I clearly had the means to help. I asked how she knew about my financial situation. She admitted our parents had told her about the monthly payments I'd been making, about how I'd always handled their emergencies. She'd had no idea I'd been supporting them for years. The revelation seemed to shift something in her understanding. She asked why our parents hadn't mentioned my contributions when they discussed their will 6 months ago. If I'd been helping them financially, surely I deserved some recognition in their estate planning. I told her about finding the will, about the clause specifically excluding me from inheritance. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, she admitted she'd assumed our parents were financially independent. She'd never questioned where their comfortable lifestyle came from or how they'd afforded to retire early. She offered to give me half of whatever she inherited to make things fair. I thanked her but declined. The issue wasn't really about money, I explained. It was about being valued, about having my contributions acknowledged and respected. Their panicked revision of the will felt more like damage control than genuine appreciation. I told her I hoped she'd be able to help them moving forward, since they'd clearly always counted on her to be their family's future. As for me, I was building my own future now, separate from theirs. Update 4. 6 months have passed since I blocked my parents' numbers. I've bought a small house with the money I'd previously been sending them. It's modest but mine, something I dreamed of having for years while I helped fund their comfortable retirement. My sister has been covering their basic expenses, though she complains regularly about the financial strain. She's suggested we split the responsibility, but I've declined each time. I've explained that my role in their lives ended when they decided I had no role in their future. Through mutual friends, I've heard that my parents are struggling to understand what went wrong. They've apparently told people that I changed suddenly, became selfish and cruel without warning. They frame themselves as victims of an ungrateful son who abandoned them in their time of need. The narrative stings, but I understand it. Acknowledging the truth would require them to admit that they took my support for granted while planning a future that excluded me. It's easier to paint me as the villain than to examine their own actions. I've also heard that they've tried to reach out through other family members, asking cousins and aunts to intercede on their behalf. The messages are always the same. They love me, they miss me, they want to work things out. But they never acknowledge what they did or why I pulled away. Last month, I received a card on my birthday. Inside, Mom had written a short note expressing hope that we could reconcile. She mentioned missing our weekly dinners and wanting things to go back to how they were before. There was no mention of the will, no acknowledgement of the months I'd spent supporting them, no recognition of why I'd distanced myself. I threw the card away, but it bothered me for days. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should forgive them and rebuild our relationship. Then I remembered sitting in Dad's office, reading document after document that treated 20 years of devotion as if it had never happened. My life is simpler now, though lonelier. I have more money, more time, more freedom to make choices based on my own needs rather than theirs. I'm dating someone new, and when she asks about my family, I keep the explanations brief. Some relationships, and naturally, I tell her. Some fade away over time. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the family dinners I'm missing, the conversations we'll never have, the grandchildren they'll never meet if I ever have kids. I wonder if my response was proportionate to their offense, if cutting them off completely was the right choice. Then I remember the text about the power being cut off, sent with no greeting and complete expectation. I remember years of treating me like an ATM rather than a son. I remember the will that erased me from their legacy while preserving everything I'd helped them build. The word I sent in response, unfortunate, still feels appropriate. It is unfortunate that they took my loyalty for granted. It's unfortunate that they discovered too late what my support had meant to their comfortable lifestyle. It's unfortunate that their attempt to secure my sister's future cost them their relationship with me. Most unfortunate of all is that they still don't seem to understand any of this. Even now, 6 months later, they apparently believe this is about money rather than respect, about inheritance rather than acknowledgement. They've revised their will, but not their understanding of what went wrong. I've built a good life without them, but I haven't forgotten the lessons they taught me. Loyalty should be mutual. Support should be acknowledged. And family bonds, no matter how strong they seem, can be broken by taking them too much for granted. The power in their house might be back on, but the bridge between us has been permanently disconnected.